The 1950s. Alice and Jack live in a typical American town. They hang out with friends, have fun, drive around, and love each other. One day, while Alice is getting ready for a party with friends, Jack goes to work with a crowd of other white collars. A female voice narrates that today is the 997th day. All employees are on their way to headquarters. All residents are safe and accounted for. Ladies are wished a good day. And Alice starts her household chores. Then she goes to her dance classes, like all the exemplary wives in town. The instructor, Shelley, reminds them, beauty is in control and grace is in symmetry. After the class, Alice returns home, chats with her neighbor Bonnie, who constantly scolds her children, and goes to take down the dried laundry. A catchy tune constantly plays in Alice's head, and she hums it southernly. She notices another neighbor, Margaret, standing in front of her house, oblivious to her surroundings. Alice starts cooking, but one egg arouses her suspicion. She squeezes it in her hand, and the egg turns out to be empty. She crushes the rest, they're all hollow. This activity is interrupted by burnt meat. In the evening, she greets her husband, beautifully dressed, with her hair done and at a set table. However, her husband decides to start with another, more pleasant activity the next day. The women relax by the pool. Alice is distracted, the song in her head again causing her concern. Then a visual sequence appears. A circle of women in wigs. Later, Alice approaches a model of the town and mindlessly traces her finger along the streets, and when she leaves the town limits, Bonnie picks her up. It's time for cocktails served by her children. During this time, the men discuss distracting topics. Everything is decent, sunny, and calm. A signal sounds and Shelley welcomes the new residents. She is happy that the couple can learn from her husband, Frank, who has created something extraordinary. A new world. Margaret interrupts Shelley's speech, saying she and her husband shouldn't be here. Alice's husband hastily leads her away, and the newly appeared Frank apologizes to the guest. The couple is going through a tough time. They're tasked to chase dreams and confront chaos, the main enemy of progress, and they all change the world. The guests echo Frank's words. Everyone here is happy, they are all one family. The man thanks the women for supporting their husbands. They are their support. The fun continues. Alice goes to find Jack, but finds Margaret, who says she has nightmares, she can't be here. But Alice's husband quickly pulls the curtain in front of Alice. Alice finds her husband in the house. Jack kisses her and the couple gets some alone time. But at the brightest moment, Alice sees Frank, who, smiling, watches their lovemaking. Later, the women gather in a shopping center and discuss their perfect lives. In poor Margaret, Alice feels sorry for her neighbor, though Bonnie thinks she brought the trouble on herself. After all, she took her son into the desert by herself. They found her, but without the child. The conversation turns to what the men are doing. No one knows for sure, but it's said that they are making weapons. Bonnie cuts in, that's not their business. Women also do work, they create comfort. At night, Alice has a nightmare, but in the morning, as usual, she sees her husband off to work and starts her household chores. Then she goes on a trip. She is the only one left on the trolley bus and says she just wants to ride. Suddenly, she sees a plane flying towards the mountains, and then it crashes. Alice yells to the driver, but he doesn't understand what she wants. She urges him to help the victims, but he is on his route and cannot deviate. Alice jumps out of the trolleybus and runs towards the mountains. She walks a long way through the desert, then reaches a road and climbs a high mountain topped by a strange dome. She approaches closer and stops at a mirrored glass. Around her, no one. Only her reflection. Alice raises her hands to the glass and loses consciousness in front of her. In the darkness, a circle of dancing women, and a male voice calls for order. People must allow themselves to discover what life should be like. The next moment, Alice finds herself on her bed. Coming to the kitchen, she sees Jack preparing dinner. The dishes are in disarray. Many groceries spoil. Alice doesn't understand what's happening, and her husband explains that when he came from work, she was already asleep, and she returned home on the trolley bus. Alice doesn't understand. Did the driver come back for her? But now Jack looks at his wife uncomprehendingly. Alice decides she saw everything in a dream. The next morning, everything goes as usual. Alice sends her husband off and starts cleaning the window glass. But suddenly it seems to move. It presses her against the wall, and the woman is gasping for air. The next moment, the phone rings and Alice is completely free. Margaret's voice on the phone urges her to get out of there. After all, she was there and saw it all herself. Alice again sees dancing women, but now it is herself and her friends. And suddenly, instead of her own reflection, Margaret appears, approaching the mirror from the other side, and starts banging her head against the surface. Alice screams and comes to. She runs home and sees Margaret on the roof of her house. Turning to Alice, the woman cuts her own throat and falls down. Alice screams in horror, and the arriving employees pick her up and carry away the neighbor's body. In the evening, she tries to explain to Jack, but he doesn't believe his wife. Margaret is in the hospital. She accidentally cut herself while washing windows. Alice feels guilty because her neighbor asked for help. What is happening around them? She asked him to tell her what he is doing on the project, but he cannot talk about it. He asks her to stop the hysterics, which could ruin everything. At night, Alice watches an advertisement for their town and catches herself thinking that it feels like she is floundering in a pool from which it is impossible to swim out. In the morning, she is cooking and suddenly starts wrapping her head with cling film. Alice seems to want to bring herself to her senses, but even the suffocation doesn't help, and she tears off the film. The arriving doctor assures the woman that it's just nervous strain. As Alice witnessed Margaret falling, the woman again insists that her neighbor slit her own throat. The doctor suggests prescribing her pills, but Jack refuses. They will cope. The doctor assures Margaret will soon recover and return home. He leaves, forgetting his briefcase, from which Alice manages to pull out a folder with Margaret's personal file, but all the text is smeared and readable. Alice burns the folder. She drinks alcohol and again sees dancing women. Then she finds herself in the bathroom. Jack is unhappy they will be late, and he brings her a dress. Then he asks Alice to think about having a child, and tonight they have a wonderful evening ahead. The couple arrives at a restaurant where all the town's residents have already gathered. A performance by a glamorous blonde is demonstrated to the audience, and Alice again sees the circle of women and Margaret killing herself. Alice feels ill, but those around her do not notice. Frank gives a speech and invites Jack on stage. He's ready to congratulate the man, as he is now entering the senior expert council. He presents Jack with a token of loyalty, a ring. The audience applauds, and Jack performs a dance of gratitude. Alice, unable to watch this, runs to the bathroom. She has a vision of another Jack who has lost his job. A perplexed Bonnie finds her. Alice tries to explain something, but her friend interrupts her. Was Alice at the headquarters? Has she gone mad? She's acting like a spoiled child. Her job is to support her husband, yet she is ruining his career. And now she is behaving like Margaret. Returning to the hall, Alice watches Jack's triumph and restrains herself. In the morning, Jack reminds her that they will have guests. In the evening, she needs to express gratitude to Frank. Alice greets the guest with a smile on her face. Everything, as always, is perfect. Her husband meets Frank. While Alice finishes the appetizers, the man enters the kitchen and suddenly starts talking to the hostess. He regrets that Bonnie didn't believe her, but she didn't believe Margaret either. He has been waiting a long time for someone to challenge him. The guests sit down at the table. Alice demonstratively takes the host seat. Jack, complying, sits next to her. The conversation about nothing begins suddenly. Alice asks why all the women in the town are from one, at most 2 states, and they all vacation in the same places. Jack tries to steer the conversation away, but Alice continues. They all met their husbands on a train, under similar circumstances. All their stories are the same, because they are told what to remember, but sometimes they suddenly remember the forbiddance. Frank is doing something with all of them. The man smirking reminds her of her nervous breakdown. Why isn't she getting treated? And why was she at the headquarters? Jack is horrified. She was at the headquarters. Frank continues. She broke the rules. It's the result of psychosis. But she revealed herself to him in his bedroom. Alice is stunned by such a dreadful lie. But Jack believes Frank unconditionally. The woman tries to appeal to the guests' common sense. Where do these products come from, and what's in them? But then Shelley stands up. She will no longer allow her husband to be insulted. The guests leave. Frank is disappointed. He expected something more interesting from her. Jack, having seen everyone out, returns to the house. Alice tries to convey to him that he is the most precious person to her, and she has to leave here anywhere, just together, and Jack agrees. They leave the house and get into the car, and then the husband apologizes to his wife. But in the next moment, employees pull her out of the car and carry her into the darkness. Alice finds herself on an operating table. Visions with her husband pass by. A doctor in a mask leans over her, in which she recognizes herself. In the next moment, Dr. Alice finishes the operation and goes home, where her unemployed husband meets her. He hasn't prepared dinner, because he didn't know what she would want. There's also no hot water. Alice is very tired. She has been standing at the operating table for 30 hours, so she denies her husband intimacy. He sits at the monitor and listens to the advertisement for a new simulation, and again a sunny morning in Paradise Town. Alice returns to her surroundings, and enthusiastic Bonnie meets her and shares the latest news. Alice hugs her children and does not notice her friend's worried look. Her husband goes to work. Alice does household chores, dances and swims, and she meets her husband. She takes the roast out of the oven, while Jack picks a record, humming a song that seems to wake Alice up. Jack walks through the dark city, entering his apartment. Meanwhile, his physical characteristics are narrated. He is absolutely fit to participate in the Victory Project with his friend Alice, and he takes on the responsibility of maintaining his wife's body's vital functions. Alice sees herself in bed, restrained and entangled with wires. Jack cares for her body because he is obliged to exit the simulation each day and work to afford it. The man lies down next to her and hums the song that Alice is hearing now. She realizes he has deprived her of real life, but the man did this to save her from constant work. Frank created this world so they could live as they wanted. He works like a damn soul for this. But she's happy. But what about the others? So they really are hostages. Jack hugs her, but Alice hits him on the head. The next moment, Bonnie finds her. Jack is dead, and she immediately reports it to Frank. Bonnie confesses that she knows everything about the simulation. She chose this life herself, because here she can be with her children, who are alive, but other women know nothing. Alice must run, or they will kill her. The woman steps out into the yard, goes to Jack's car and drives into the desert. Employees chase after her. Cars catch up with her, at Alice making a maneuver causes a collision in which a doctor dies. Her pursuers continue the chase. Frank is informed of the incident He orders the woman to be captured at all costs. In the next moment, Shelley stabs him with a knife. He's a fool and has botched everything. Alice races towards the mountain, but near the summit her car stalls. She continues on foot. Employees pursue her, and they're ahead the dome. The woman approaches it. Her pursuers just steps behind her, and suddenly feels her husband's hands on her shoulders, asking her not to leave him. Shelley reaches out to strike darkness. Visions of the perfect life in victory, and aside from a woman waking up in reality. That case when it's hard to take someone's side. The husband deprived his wife of reality, with good intentions to make her happy, and probably many would want to escape into the simulation from everyday problems. But can you make someone happy against their will?